people who study the Earth's regional differences are called geographers. Their science is called geography. When geographers develop their expertise, they tend to emphasize either physical geography, the study of climate, terrain, and vegetation, or cultural geography, the study of how people identify with places. This program will explore cultural geography. Follow me. The same way we can talk about the physical attributes of regions of the world, we can talk about culture regions, areas we can group by language, customs, and other social characteristics. Geographers don't just study the social characteristics of distant regions. Culture isn't just something other people have. All of the principles of geography can be found right where you live. In this program, we stayed close to home to explore Scotland County in North Carolina, USA. 3 types of culture regions are recognized by geographers: functional, formal, and vernacular. A functional region is an area with slow-changing boundaries that emanate from a node. We can refer to North Carolina as a functional region because it has fixed political boundaries and a node, the state capital in Raleigh. There can be functional boundaries within functional boundaries. North Carolina has 100 counties. The node would be in the county seat, in our case, Laurinburg.
Scotland County was named Scotland County in the division of Robson and Richmond simply because of the density of the Highland settlers and descendants that lived here. So very appropriate that that name came about, but not the only county within this region that has Scottish backgrounds, but the one that got the nod with the name.
A formal culture region is an area that geographers define by shared cultural traits. We could carve Scotland County into smaller regions based on religious denominations, but those could overlap with other traits of interest, such as ethnicity or dialect. We might look at Scotland County in terms of city versus country. It depends what the research question is, or what the geographer is interested in. For example, regional health differences may be linked to culture. A vernacular culture region is one that is perceived to exist by people. It's sometimes based on economic, political, or historical identities rather than on the natural environment. Vernacular regions don't necessarily have distinct boundaries, and inhabitants may feel they belong to more than one such culture region. We could be in the South as opposed to the Deep South or the Bible Belt. How do geographers identify a vernacular culture region? One way is to find reference to it in commerce, news coverage, tourism, and other forms of symbolism, such as place names. For example, North Carolina has about 300 miles of coastline, and this stretch is popularly referred to as the Crystal Coast. When tobacco farming dominated this region near the state line, it was called the Border Belt. Geographers refer to place names as toponyms. Early settlers to any region often name places after locations that remind them of their heritage. A kind of linguistic landscape is formed that creates a local identity.
Well, I think we have a lot of traits that are remaining here in the region. First, obviously surnames, yes. When you look in our phone directories, you can obviously see the predominance of Highland names that we find here, not just Mac names, but other Highland names like Sinclair and Nicholson and Graham and names such as that are definitely Highland as well. So numerically, they were the founding fathers, if you will, politically and economically within this area.
In Scotland County, local civic leaders still rely on this kind of Scottish symbolism in commerce and public relations. The county seat, Laurinburg, has a sister city relationship with Oban, Scotland.
That project started off as a way for us to reach out and perhaps provide some sort of present-day link with the area from which our people came from. And when we look at Oban, it's very close to the areas from which many of the settlers, many of the early families that came to settle Scotland County came from, certainly the largest town in that region. Scotland County's earliest Highland people were mostly coming from an area called Appin, which is in Upper Argyll there. The parishes of Lismore and Appin were the founding places of our earlier families, our Stewarts and Carmichaels, and a number of families that came from that particular area. So it was a natural place for us to sort of try to forge a new link with.
Within culture regions, people can be identified by their cultural traits. These are learned behaviors that make one group different from another. Food is a great example of how cultural traits differ regionally.
Well, personally, I think Southern food, the Scottish people, now, which I am, I'm a Scottish, I think once they got to the United States, they had to learn a whole new culture. I really believe the Native Americans started teaching them how to eat corn and grow corn and all these other things. And down south, when you're down here, we all grew our own crops. So we started growing our own vegetables, and we started growing our own livestock and all that. The number one thing that's Southern is fried chicken. It's got to be. Because the first Sunday we opened here, we didn't have fried chicken, and everybody told us right quick, if you're going to stay open on Sunday, we got to have fried chicken on Sunday. So from then on, we had fried chicken every day.
There is a specific type of Southern cuisine. There are certain foods that are specific just for the South and that are local favorites within this region of the South, just as there are specific foods that are for the North. Really, for instance, in Minnesota, pickled fish or casseroles or white bread or things like that are common staples. So what we have here is as we talked about, we have our pulled pork with our vinegar based, and you can see that there are pieces of red pepper mixed in with this to create a spice. It's very dry. You can see the bits and pieces of the pork that just fall apart as you're even looking at it. This is also known as chopped pork, unlike stringed pork that you'd find or basic sliced pork that you might get at other barbecue restaurants.
And right in this area is known as a vinegar base, which we use mostly vinegar. Now, if you go down into South Carolina, the lower part of South Carolina, it's more of a mustard base, and the barbecue is more of yellow looking. Now, if you go west and go up into the mountains area, it's more of a red color. So right within 100 or so miles, you can get 3 different kinds of barbecue. Now, which one is the best? They still trying to figure that one out. But as far as I prefer, I'm an Eastern man. I think Eastern barbecue, you can taste the meat more so. Whereas the Western barbecue, you have more sauce on it. So maybe you don't taste as much of the meat. But I like that. The main thing that most people eat around here is your collards or your turnip greens, and then your corn and butter beans, and then your sweet potatoes. And we're finding out now that sweet potatoes is probably one of the most highest in fiber. So we are trying to put more sweet potatoes out on the line and stuff like that. This area in here is famous for collard sandwiches.
A collard sandwich is only 2 pieces of cornbread with collards. You put the collards in the middle, or you can put the collards on the bottom. 2 pieces of fatback, banana peppers.
A great place to find culturally specific food is at local heritage festivals, because food can be a reflection of ethnic pride and agricultural traditions. In Scotland County, 2 examples are the Kuumba Festival and Highland Games.
Well, one couldn't have asked for a better day for the annual Kuumba Festival. This celebration is a day full of customs, food, faith, and culture for this African heritage. As you can see, the public has come out in droves to support the speakers, performers, vendors, and the true expression of creativity in which Kuumba itself represents. Is that good, Nathan?
Yeah, it's really good.
Have you had
It's
collard?
Growing up, I've had collards. I've never had it in sandwich before. It has a slightly bitter taste to it, but the cornbread milds it out. I think if it had some hot sauce.
Make it really punch it.
Yeah, that would really make it.
Here in America, there have been Highland gatherings for 140, 150 years or more.
I'm really enjoying the displays of masculinity, and the food is also okay. So we had our first haggis moments ago.
This is haggis. It's a traditional Scottish meal. It's originally cooked inside of a sheep's stomach, and it has more of the pieces of the sheep that you really wouldn't think of eating, like the heart, the liver, the spleen. And the sauce that I have on here is brown sauce, which is equivalent to Heinz 57 sauce here in the United States.
We're probably the largest haggis producer in the United States. It's a recipe that my father and his brother kind of put together when they came to this country. It's not exactly the same recipe as you would find over in Scotland, the traditional recipe. We make it a little bit more palatable.
Has a really nice meaty consistency to it, and actually tastes a lot like meatloaf, but with a livery overtone associated with it. And it would be really, really plain without the brown sauce on it. It would sort of have a dull flavor to it. So the brown sauce really adds a lot of spice to it because there's really nothing else that's put into it. But really good, delicious.
Obviously, the cuisine of people and places changes over time. Even in Scotland, people don't eat haggis routinely, if ever. But the point is, food is regional. Food is an expression of ethnic identity. It's an important signpost on your way to finding culture.